Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Today I am going to be canning some beef cubes, and I'm going to be using this, my Tefal 22 quart pressure canner. Now ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that are scared of this is your friend. Just read the instructions for whatever canner you decide to buy. Don't be afraid of it. It is here to help you. The first thing we're going to need, of course, is a pressure canner. Second thing we're going to need some lids. We're going to need some rings. We're going to need some jars. Quart jars is what I'm going to use today. And we're going to need some salt, some meat, of course some water, some vinegar, and just your basic tools for canning. This here is just a little stick with a magnet on it right there. This magnet is used to pull your lids from your hot pot. I do understand that Ball Canning came out and said that we no longer need to heat up our lids. However, I still do it because it gives me a warm and fuzzy feeling inside. In addition to this, we're going to need your canning funnel and your jar picker upper. This is used to pick up the jars and either put them in or take them out of your pressure canner. Now let's go ahead and show you how I put the meat inside the jars. Now ladies and gentlemen, I am using quart jars, and quart jars usually take about 2, maybe a little more than 2 pounds of meat. If you remember the meat that I purchased on my last payday prep, you'll notice that that is the meat that I'm going to use today. I purchased around 16.5 pounds altogether, which should fill all 7 jars, which is the maximum number of quart jars that my Tefal canner will take at one time. It'll fill 7 jars. I might have a little left over. If I do, we'll have stew for dinner tonight. However, when you are pressure canning, you do not have to sanitize your jars. All I did with these jars was get them from the shelf. I went ahead and cleaned them inside and out, rinsed them, and put them on the counter. For those of you that want to understand why we don't need to sanitize our jars prior to pressure canning, is because when you pressure can, you're going to kill all of the bacteria inside that jar and inside that pressure canner. As opposed to when you water bathe, that does not happen. So when you water bathe, you have to really be very sanitary. Make sure that everything you're using has been sanitized and follow the steps to the letter. If not, you may end up with a bad batch of jelly or jams or whatever it is that you're water bathing. So now the next step is simply to go ahead and put our meat in the jar. Now I'm not going to record myself filling every one of these jars of meat because it's going to be the exact same thing that I do when I show you how I do the first jar. Right? One thing that I like to use is one of these rolling pins. I take the end off, and you'll see what I use this for here in a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, this is so simple that anybody can do this. This is not rocket science. All you do is, if you buy your meat and it's not in cubes like this, you can cut it in as small or as big cubes as you like. Do is just put it in here, and what we're going to do is we're going to try to keep that meat compressed. We're not going to try to beat it in there with a sledgehammer, but we're going to try to keep it compressed as we go along. So when I get about halfway full, I'm going to go ahead and grab that rolling pin that you saw me grab, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to push it down nice and sturdy. Like I said, you're not going to go and get a sledgehammer. All you're going to do is just going to push it down nice and sturdy. Some people may ask, what about the air pockets that are down there? Because I'm not going to fill this up with broth. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm filling this, let me go ahead and tell you about those air pockets and why it is that you don't want to have air pockets, and if you do, how to mitigate not losing your seal, or how to mitigate losing your seal. There's something called burping when you're pressure canning. And all burping is an air pocket that is inside of a jar that expands very rapidly. And through that rapid expansion, it'll make the lid burp. It'll lift up the lid just a little bit to allow some of that negative pressure that's inside. I'm sorry, some of that positive pressure that's inside the jar. That's burping. So how do you mitigate that? If you have jars like I have right here. They have a little air pocket here. It's got a little air pocket here and here. The way I mitigate that is by allowing these jars to naturally decompress. I am going to go ahead and let the pressure come out of the canner naturally, meaning I'm going to leave it on top of the stove for the next hour or so after it's done with the canning, and I'm going to let it depressurize naturally without assisting it. If you do that, any of these little air pockets that you have, they will not burp and make you lose your seal. So now that we have our jar pretty much full, as you can see there, it's up to the line right there. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add a half a teaspoon of salt. Now when it comes to salt, this I just filled up with salt that I'm only going to use for canning. So this is kosher salt. It doesn't have any iodine or anything in it. So all you do is just take a half a teaspoon, and you don't have to use salt. And you can put a little bit less salt, or you can put more salt in there if you like. I like the flavor of the meat when it comes out of the jar with using a half a teaspoon. So I put a half a teaspoon of salt. So I'll be right back as soon as I fill up the rest of these jars with the meat. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you can see I filled up all the jars and I put salt in every one of them. And I was right, we probably have about a pound and a quarter of meat left, so we'll be having beef stew tonight for dinner. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go over it with one jar, and then I'll go ahead and do all the other jars off camera. First thing you do after you do this is I take a sponge, not that it's soaking wet, but just lightly damp. I go ahead and clean the edge of the rim. Then I come back with a clean paper towel and I make sure that it's nice and dry. Then I come back with a little bit of vinegar and I do the same thing. I go over the rim of the jar. Then I grab my lid from my pot. I place it on top, make sure that it's centered. I go ahead and put my ring on and I grab, this is how I do it, okay? You don't want to turn it on, put it on really tight. I just grab 2 fingers, and once it's finger tight, that's it. This is ready to go inside of the canner. Now let me do a couple of little Q&As that I've had in the past. People have asked me, should I fill this up with broth? No, it's going to make its own broth when it's going through the pressurizing, process. For those of you that don't know, when you pack your meat raw into the jars like this, it's called a cold pack method, meaning that you're packing it cold into the jar and it's not pre-cooked. What is the difference between cold pack and hot pack? Cold pack is what you just saw me do. Hot pack is when you first cook the meat and put it in the jar, then process it. What's the difference? It's going to be the texture, ladies and gentlemen. When you cold pack it, it's going to have a texture something like when you grab some beef stew from the store. It's kind of like a crumbly texture, depending on how big the pieces are. If the pieces are pretty big, it may be more of a stringy texture, but it's that kind of texture, like the texture that you get from a beef stew that you get from the store, or from canned meat that you get from the store. Because when they process the canned meat that you buy at the store, canned beef, they're doing the exact same thing that I'm doing here, except they're doing it at a macro level, right? They're doing it in a factory setting. Another question that I get a lot is, can I go ahead and put vegetables in here, like onions and peppers and things like that? Ladies and gentlemen, you can put pretty much anything in there that you want. Whenever I process meats, I like to have, I guess you can say, I like to start with a clean canvas, meaning that I can use this as an ingredient to make any dish I want that has beef included in it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have good news for anyone that's a vegan. For all of you vegans out there, you can do this. You can do the exact same thing I'm doing, with the exception of one thing. Follow every step I just showed you, but instead of putting beef in here, just fill the glass with water up to about here. So just fill your jar with water up to about here, then go ahead and pressure can it, and this will be vegan proof. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I know I'm going to get in trouble for that, but that was just a joke. All right, let me go ahead and do the rest of these jars, and then I'll show you what I do when I put them in the pressure canner. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, all 7 jars fit in there nice. This canner, you would have to check the instructions for your canner if it's different from this one. This canner recommends that you put at least 3/4 of a gallon of water in it. However, the way I gauge it is, I put water in it until the water is about halfway up one of these jars. I've never had a problem with my canner drying up during a session doing that. I have heard from other people that have put the 3/4 of a gallon in there and told me that the canner dried up, and if you allow that to happen, the canner will go bad. It will bend the bottom of the canner and it will go bad. So I've always put a gallon in there, and that seems to always be just enough to get my water about halfway up. Now, in addition to adding water in there, one other thing I do is I put in a few ounces of vinegar, of white vinegar. And what that does is if your water has any hard solids in it or minerals in it, it will keep the water from getting the outside of the jars cloudy. Now, if you skip that step, it's not going to do anything bad. You're not going to have to redo anything. All you have to do is just spend a little extra effort cleaning the outside of your jars, because they'll come out a little bit cloudy. Now all we have to do is put on our lid. However, one thing that I might be forgetting to tell you is, being that this is a cold pack method, meaning that the meat is not cooked, the water that I put in there is cold because the meat is at room temperature. Whenever I do the cold pack method, I try to get my meat out on the counter and let it come to room temperature. That way there's not a big disparity between the temperature of the meat and the temperature of the water. Okay, now that everything's in there, I've got my vinegar in there. Everything's ready to go. Let me go ahead and put on my lid, and then let me show you a couple of things on this specific canner in case one of you out there has it and hasn't used it yet. Now, I don't know what the technical name for this is, but I call this a mechanical weight, right? Because it's on there. It's not one that you take off and put on like the other canners that you're used to seeing. This is a mechanical weight that has 4 settings. The first setting that you see here is the steam setting, meaning that this is completely open to the inside, and when it starts steaming, steam will come out of this hole. Your number 1 is your setting for 5 pounds of pressure. Your number 2 is 10. Your number 3 is 15. Now, depending where you live, at what altitude you live in, will depend on what setting you will need, i.e. how many pounds of pressure you're going to need to pressure can your meats at. Where I live, I only need to pressure can it at 2. However, ladies and gentlemen, I've always done it at 3. I've always done it at 15 pounds, and maybe that's because I'm a little OCD. Remember, I have 5 backups to my heating system, so I want to make sure that I take any precaution possible. Some people may say that using it at 15 when you don't have to, it may cause some of your seals to break through the pressure canning process. However, like I said, I've never had any problems, and whenever this is done, like I said, I do not assist it in depressurizing. I let it depressurize naturally. So when we start our burner, we're going to leave it on this setting right here that has the steam setting. And once it's steaming pretty quickly, you're going to start your timer for 10 minutes. Then after 10 minutes, you're going to set it to the setting. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on real quick, and I'm going to come back once it's been steaming for 10 minutes so I can show you how I put it on the setting. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so as you can see, we've got steam coming out of here at a fast rate. It's been doing this for 10 minutes. Once that steam starts coming out of there at that rate, you set your timer for 10 minutes. Then you can go ahead and adjust your weight to the desired level that you want to adjust it to. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and put it on number 3, which is 15 pounds. Now that we've got it at the setting that we want it at, we're going to keep our eye out on this pressure gauge. Once the pressure gauge gets to 10 pounds, okay, I want the pressure gauge to get to 10 pounds. What we're going to do is we're going to start our timer for 10 minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and set the flame on low, and it should maintain at least 10 or more pounds of pressure in there. Very simple, ladies and gentlemen. This is not rocket science. So I hope that you're getting something out of this and that you try this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you back once I'm ready to put my flame down to low so that I can show you that it's at 10 pounds or above. And then what I do specifically with my range, with my stove, is I move this back to the slowest setting as far as putting it on the smallest burner. So I'll move this back one burner to the smallest burner, and then I'll go ahead and adjust the flame for about 10 minutes or so until I am comfortable to know that the size of the flame is going to keep that pressure above 10. Usually it stays around 12, 13 pounds when I use my small burner. But that's something that you're going to have to figure out with your stove, with your range. You can see here, my pressure is at about 12 pounds, roughly. 11 and a half, almost 12 pounds. It's been above 10 pounds of pressure for 10 minutes. Now I'm going to set my timer for 90 minutes. Right? If you are pressure canning quartz, you want to set your timer for 90 minutes. I usually let it go about 3 or 5 minutes past. It's just what I do. But 90 minutes is what's required. And if you are pressure canning pints, you're looking at 75 minutes. All right. So what I'll do now is I'm going to set my timer for 90 minutes. I'll be back when this is done, and I'll show you the end result. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you may have noticed that this video, I haven't really done a lot of talking about the pressure can or anything like that. The reason I haven't is because it's as simple as I've shown you. It is truly as simple as you've seen so far to be able to pressure can something. All right, so we're going to be back once my 90 minutes is up, and once I allow this to completely depressurize naturally. What I mean by that is that once the 90 minutes are up, I'm not going to move the weight. I'm not going to move it. I'm going to leave it right where it is, and I'm going to let the pressure come out naturally without me helping it. We are done, ladies and gentlemen. If you take a look at this, it's completely at zero. I did move the pressure canner to this burner so that I can easily move the jars from here to my counter, but I haven't opened it and I haven't taken the pressure valve down to zero. So once I see that it's on zero, what I do is I carefully bring this one down at a time, just to make sure that that's not malfunctioning, that the pressure gauge is not malfunctioning, and that a lot of steam won't come out. So now it's at 5 pounds, and now, there you go. That means there's absolutely no pressure in there. So now I'll go ahead and open it up. When you open it up, ladies and gentlemen, this is very important. Always open it like this, so that if there's any steam, it'll go away from you. And you see there was steam. That way it won't come at you and burn you. Let's take a look at the inside and see how they look. And everything is looking really nice. They are still processing. When you lift the jars up to bring them onto your counter. Oh, and can you see that, ladies and gentlemen? That's my Instapot. And I took the leftover beef and made some beef stew. And it came out very good, by the way. You want to lift them straight up. You don't want to tilt them because you don't really want to take the chance of any juice getting in between the seal and the jar. So you're going to lift it straight up. And doesn't that look pretty? And then you're just going to put it straight down on the counter. And when you put them down on the counter, you try to keep a few inches, or at least an inch, I would say, in between them. That way they can have some good airflow in between. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. It's that easy. Now, for you newbies out there, make sure that you listen to what I'm about to say. Once you put these jars on the counter, you are going to leave them there for the next 12 to 24 hours. They're still processing and they're still going through the sealing process. So don't touch them for the next 12 to 24 hours. Usually, I'll put them here on the counter. Right now, it's about 3:45, 4 p.m. And I just won't touch them until tomorrow when I get up. Then I'll go ahead and wash them and everything like that. And then put them away. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you got something out of this. If you have any questions about this, join me tomorrow during our live stream Sunday at 12 noon Alaska time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place. And you know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to all of you and your families. This is Alaska Prepper. I am out.